made things verb or adjectives, or creating subjective interpretation into adjective pronouns or verbs that don't exist in time and space. During my voyage, through this learning curve between 96 through 99, I met many judges. Some were very mean to me and some were very kind to me, sharing secrets, sharing technology, sharing techniques of what made them a judge, how to become a judge. As I became very effective in it, I made many enemies in the judicial system, and I made many friends. There's good and bad in everything. They were caught up in usury of their system, and I was figuring out how to get out of that usury of that system. In the studies, the U.S. judicial system back in 1996 through 1999 would jump under what they call the employees of the courtroom, being the judges, the clerks, the sheriffs, the bailiffs, the prosecutors, the defendants. They would all jump behind what's called the Foreign Sovereigns Immunity Act. In the Foreign Sovereigns Immunity Act, it was the bankruptcy protection of sovereigns where their sovereignty was they were no longer sovereigns, where they were bankrupt. So what we had to do was uncover what made them bankrupt. How did they get to that bankrupt position to be under the safeguard of the Foreign Sovereigns Immunity Act? And so it took us into studying where the United States government came up through 3 bankruptcies, stemming from when they first borrowed the money on July 1st, 1775. Years later, and I'll come back to this, but years later I got to personally look in Benjamin Franklin's postal book in the museum at the Benjamin Franklin Post Office in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I got to look into his bank charter and see where they borrowed the money and how it worked. But I did not, at the time when I was challenging the U.S. judicial system, I could only take it back to where they could see, because they had to have joinder, right? You had to have joinder. And so I would introduce the 1929 stock market crash, and then the 70-year moratorium for international bankruptcies run 70 years, which took us to November 2nd, or actually September 17th, 1999, and 45 days took us to the election. And then for that 1 year, under the 1999 to 2000 presidency, Mr. Clinton at the time, in his book, he says, "I'm the last U.S. president." Well, this is what he's talking about. He's saying he's not telling the people the truth of what actually happened. The federal government had to physically vacate the Constitution, which were the rules and guidelines for the bankruptcy, and they physically had to leave the District of Columbia for so many days. Thus, the Florida election of the Florida Chads of the year of 2000 on the presidential election, because the president was the trustee, the administrator, the chief administrator of the bankruptcy. That was his function to all presidents during the bankruptcy. One thing that was very interesting that I'd like to bring up is during this journey of figuring this out, some judges would really work with me and want to learn, and some judges would be very antagonistic and, of course, throw me right in jail. I figured out about the judicial system and the jails being a clearinghouse for custom house brokers, how when you check into their jail system, you engage in usury with them, and they run you on timelines in those vessels. And so I figured all that out during this time frame, and I would later use it to my advantage in other cases as my journey and my quest would go on. Dealing with the Foreign Sovereigns Immunity Act and the bankruptcy, when they came out of the bankruptcy, which means I could target the exact date that they were going to have to leave the bankruptcy. And I was living with my grandmother at the time, and she had a placemat of all the presidents of the United States on this placemat. And she was, because of the Mockingbird program and the things that I was going through in the local community, running me through the newspapers, slandering my name, slandering me, causing me to lose all my friends, people not shunning me in the community, not wanting to be around me because I was making a stand on grammar, on the flag, and because it was correct. It's true, and it's correct that when you go into a port to navigate and set sail of your contract in that foreign port, you have to give closure on what flag you're coming to the port with. This is true. Nobody in the world can take that away from anyone out there. And you have the right, the sovereign right, to hoist your colors when you come into that port. Whether you know how to do it or not, I'm not disputing that or anybody's techniques. I just know that there are timelines that function within that. With that being said, my grandmother was very concerned about me on a personal level because of the slander and the abuse that I was taking in the newspapers, the shunning she was seeing in the community towards me, and she wanted me to go back to college. And I told her I would go back to college based on one criteria. They would have to announce a president on November 7th, which was the election night for the year 2000. And this was in July of that year, of 2000, before the election. And I had filed in a document during the slander and the things that I had been going through in Fremont County, through the Fremont County judicial system. There was a judge specifically that came off the bench for me 9 times. His name was Judge Donald Hall. He taught me many secrets. And I was very blessed to have him as my foe and then as my friend later in life.